Everybody, the Simple Handicap for Wednesday, October 9th. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. We've got a lot to talk about this morning, so let's get right into it. Market rundown for this Wednesday morning, NFL week number 6. San Francisco on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. It's the 49ers, 3.5-point favorites at Chris, 3.5-point favorites at Pinnacle and Bet Online, 3 minus 20 or 25 at Circa and other sports books on the board. We're looking at a total opened 48, got bet down as low as 47.5. We are seeing that number tick up slowly this morning. I'm thinking about this game and wondering if there's going to be over money coming into the market. Haven't seen a big push on the over yet. It is a high total for these Thursday games. Curious to see if there is over money with both of these defenses struggling. Hufanga for San Francisco now listed to miss up to a month. Really thought the 49ers defense early in the season looked like it was a changed unit. A lot of energy on the sidelines. Everyone was buying in. Now we're starting to hear a lot of what we heard in this time of year last year from the 49ers defense. Things are changing up a little bit. Uncertainty around if the coaching staff and the personality is fitting in right and meshing with the defensive front. Bosa had an interesting press conference hinting at maybe things are a little bit uncertain between roles up front on the defensive line. I'm just not too sure. And on the Seahawks side, I think it's a big ask for this defense to get right against a 49ers offense, which week after week continues to put up big yards per play numbers. Moving on to Sunday, it is the Jacksonville Jags on the road at the Chicago Bears. Bears in this game, 2-point favorites at Chris, 2.5 at Circa. And then it is a split between 2 minus 115, minus 120, and 2.5 left to right across the screen. Total in this game continues to go up, and rightfully so. As high as 45 this morning at Chris, 44.5 elsewhere on the board. We had a release on the over earlier in the week at 43. There was some follow-up to that yesterday. This number continues to get bet up. Weather-wise, we're looking at this game different from what we saw the Jets-Vikings game last week, which even with the rain in the forecast, still took over money. I think that's going to be a common theme for these Hotspur Stadium games. We have a Jags defense that can't stop anybody. On the other side, it's a Bears offense getting better and better each week, but a defense that has certainly benefited from some schedule. And if there is that change, potentially with Peterson calling plays, or at least the emergence of Bigsby and Robinson a little bit more prevalent in the Jags offense, we're going to see Jacksonville move the football on this Bears defense. So be curious to see if this continues to push up past 45. That's the high mark of the week over at Chris. Washington on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens 6-point favorites, minus 115 at Chris, 6.5 elsewhere, left to right across the screen. Total got to the high point of 53, and we're now seeing all the totals across the board begin to lean towards the under, and that is something that's been pretty common once you hit this point, especially around this Tuesday, Wednesday mark of the week, as there's been a big appetite in the market for totals going under in these low 50 numbers. Arizona on the road at the Green Bay Packers. Packers 5-point favorites across the screen. Total in this game, 50 from left to right across the screen. Few places like Chris, like Pinnacle, both leaning under back towards 49.5. Curious to see if the Packers are going to get bet today or tomorrow. Think there's going to be some intrigue in this number as it has crept down a little bit from the look ahead. Looking at this matchup with the Packers getting a week healthier with Jordan Love, getting more settled in the pocket, getting Romeo Doubs back in all likelihood based on early week reporting. We'll see how that scenario is handled a little bit around the team and get more insight on that today, but that's another receiver they need in that lineup with Christian Watson still dealing with the injury for a couple more weeks. I think we see the Packers offense really break out against this Cardinals defense in this spot. Houston on the road at the New England Patriots. Bit of a surprise, somewhat. Talked about it yesterday and how there was hints that this could be coming. I say personal surprise because I can't understand why New England, of all weeks, wants this to be the debut week when they could do it next week against Jacksonville over in London. I get that that's a tough scenario, so perhaps it's just getting Drake May, who will be starting in this game, acclimated to the team before dealing with that scenario, going across to London to play the Jags, who are already going to be there. But on paper and on the surface, man, this looks like a bad matchup. As you're welcome to the NFL moment, as it's Drake May behind an offensive line with a ton of problems against the Houston Texans pass rush. Film guys are all commenting on it. It's a bad matchup up front. Would certainly think we see him with a bit of a rude welcome to the NFL. Houston will be without Nico Collins for this game. That leaves some questions about the wide receivers as they have to match up with Christian Gonzalez on the other side. Is Gonzalez going to match up with which wide receiver? That's a bit of a matchup situation that needs to be figured out as he's become a true shutdown corner number one for another year in a row. Just dominant so far this season. And Houston, facing a defense like New England, may face some issues with some of the coverage types historically that Stroud has fared better or worse against. Certainly need to find a bit of a ground game as we saw from Miami. So there's injury news to watch with the Mixon news we're waiting for to see if he's going to be in the backfield for Houston. But certainly a game with the Houston Texans up front on defense, you would think they have an advantage. And if we talk about D'Amico Ryans coming from this 49ers scheme, if we want to put it that way, we saw the New England Patriots offense not have answers against the 49ers and not have answers against the Jets either. So this is round 3 against this 49ers defensive scheme. Failed miserably in the first 2 times. What's going to be different this week? Tampa Bay on the road at New Orleans. Tampa Bay a 3.5-point favorite to Chris, as there was Buccaneers money hitting the market yesterday. Little bit of lack of clarity whether or not it'll be Jake Haener or if it will be Spencer Rattler at quarterback for the Saints. As it sounds yesterday evening, maybe leaning a little bit more towards Rattler starting in this game for the Saints. It's a banged-up offensive line for New Orleans going against Todd Bowles, who makes life very difficult for young quarterbacks in the pocket and has his entire career. We saw what he did to Jaden Daniels in week 1. This seems like it would be a difficult spot, too. Now, there's going to be the commentary about Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos in that game, and why wasn't life difficult for Bo Nix? That was his best game of the season. I think it's important to point out just how many injuries the Bucs had at multiple levels of their defense in that game against the Broncos. They're going to likely get back Antoine Winfield in this game, one of the better safeties. Would expect that he is back at practice. He's been off to the side the last couple weeks. If you get him back, if you potentially get Kancey back, this defense is quite close to full strength. And so it, to me, matches up similar to week 1, rather than that Broncos game where they had so many injuries and Denver was able to look very good on offense. Cleveland on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles, still 9.5 or 8.5, depending when you look for the Eagles. Total 43.5. Was talking with another professional bettor yesterday. We were going back and forth. What do you like? What are you looking at? What are you thinking? And the Cleveland Browns at 9.5. Again, it's probably going to be the case until we find kind of the level here for the Browns. It was a talking point of, like, how can the Eagles be laying this big of a number with the defense struggling like they have? Massive number for the Eagles, but there are just way too many negatives and way too much uncertainty around the Browns that I think anybody can be comfortable betting into them and getting something that they're comfortable in handicapping in terms of an effort level, which is starting to come in question as just what this team has left on offense and what they're trying to establish as an identity. Is the locker room still there for Watson? There's so many questions here with this Browns team, and going on the road to take on the Eagles and Fangio, a pretty stiff challenge for an offense struggling as much as this Browns offense is. Indianapolis on the road at the Tennessee Titans. Colts 1-point favorites. Total in this game 43.5. We'll get news today on Anthony Richardson. We'll get news on Jonathan Taylor. I think based on the practice schedule last week, where Richardson was participating and him getting ruled out later on Saturday officially, I think we see Richardson back and available for the Colts. Do they put him back in this game? I would expect most likely if he is healthy and ready to go. To me, there's more uncertainty and yet to be determined status with Jonathan Taylor. We saw a very different practice schedule for him last week than what we saw with Richardson. It's a high ankle sprain that, as we've seen with Mixon in Houston, keeps running backs out for quite a long time as it nags and tends to go longer than expected on the timeline. So it'll be curious to see what we get with Richardson and Taylor in the injury report today. But I got to say, I'm certainly warming up a little bit to the side here with Tennessee, but these injuries are going to have an impact on this number. If you get Richardson, if you get if you get Richardson, if you get Taylor, this number is going to be pushed up, even if it is Will Levis getting the start for Tennessee over Mason Rudolph. I don't think the Titans QBs are going to have an impact on the number, but the Colts skill guys, I think, will definitely lead to a little bit of a bump, but certainly intrigued here by the Titans in a spot where they should have their best offensive game of the entire season to date. LA Chargers on the road at the Denver Broncos. Chargers still holding steady as a 3-point favorite. Total 35.5. We have the conflicting releases from two different services on the Chargers, on the Broncos. 2.5 minus 120, and back the other way at 3. Curious to see if this comes back off of the 3. With a total this short, I would think the 3 becomes pretty appetizing to some bettors at some point, considering how great the Denver Broncos defense has looked. Well, let's see what happens. Now, the Chargers injury report, Justin Herbert, both left and right tackles, Slater and Alt. That will be interesting to see today, just what level they are at. But I would fully expect Herbert and Alt to be out there. Question mark around Rashawn Slater at left tackle. If he's out there, I think the Chargers still look quite good in this spot with the big coaching advantage. Pittsburgh on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. Steelers still 3-point favorites across the board. Total in this game from 38.5 now down as low as 36.5. Atlanta on the road at the Carolina Panthers. Falcons 6-point favorites left to right across the screen with a 6.5 showing at Chris. Would think there's some interest at some point in the Panthers as this number's lingering around 6.5. Don't think 6.5s are going to last. I would love to see a 7 in this game personally. I don't think we're going to get that. Would think at this price, in this range, the Panthers become quite interesting to bettors. Carolina's going out of their way to bolster, as it's being labeled, the offensive line. They add Cade Mays, also add some depth at the linebacker position where they are severely injured. Nothing groundbreaking in terms of signings, but any help is more than they have currently with the current state of their offensive line as well as their defensive interior. So many injuries for the Panthers. This at least helps them out a little bit with that depth. Detroit on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. Lions still holding steady as soft 3.5-point favorites. Total in this game 52.5 with a high of 53 at circa. Detroit on paper matches up exceptionally well against this Dallas Cowboys front. It's an indoor game. You get the Cowboys matched up against the Lions defense that plays a lot of man coverage. That should match up very well for CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. There's a lot here that looks great from an offensive matchup standpoint. Big question is, again, with these totals in these low 50s range as we get to this 53, what's the breaking point here? And if you are intrigued in the over, are you going to get some buyback on the under? We haven't seen a number break through this 53 range all season. Would be curious to see if this is the first or if it's another game with a total this high that just sees blind under money come in. Cincinnati on the road at the New York Giants. Bengals 3 minus 123 at Chris, 3.5 even money at circa, 3.5 everywhere else on the board. Those two numbers effectively representing the same thing. 46.5 on the total, up to 49. Everybody's going to be watching for Malik Neighbors in this game on the injury report for the Giants today. He should, by all counts, be back at practice. If he's not, and you're thinking about now the number of days between the injury and not getting into concussion protocol, step 1 or 2, that becomes very concerning. And so today, if he is back, if he's practicing, would fully expect him to be good to go on Sunday with the week time to clear in between after missing week 5. Monday Night Football, it's the Buffalo Bills on the road at the New York Jets. Bills 2-point favorites at Chris, 2.5 left to right elsewhere across the screen. Total from 44 down to 40.5. Probably a big expectation from listeners for a long-winded Robert Saleh firing rant. And I'm struggling with this because I don't have a general take. And I think it's more important to talk about what the Jets are now and what they need to do going forward and the position they're in now. If I was to just give a quick thought about the whole situation, I would say, 1, if this was on the table, why didn't it happen in February? Why is it happening now? And then 2, I can't help but get the ownership meetings in March out of my mind where Saleh and Johnson got in a heated argument, and the post-argument quote that reporters have from Johnson was that Robert Saleh needs to be a better coach. Jeff is running the defense. We have good special teams. His concentration needs to be on the offense. This year is all about offense, offense, offense. And if the offense has been as embarrassing as it has through 5 weeks, where the numbers right now are the same as they were last year, Saleh's failed in his job. Now, there's theories and commentary around him wanting to fire Nathaniel Hackett and Todd Downing taking over play calling duties and what that looked like behind the scenes. I know it's popular and easy for everybody to run and point the finger at Aaron Rodgers and the dysfunctional Jets. Everybody had their I got you or I told you so clip yesterday in media. I don't know what's true or not true from that. But I do know that there was a lot of onus put on Robert Saleh to get the offense right, and he didn't. And this is an all-in year for the Jets where everybody's job was on the line. I would rather, if this was something that was brewing and going to happen, that it happened now for the outlook of the Jets than in 5 weeks or 7 weeks or 10 weeks when things are out of reach. Now, it's over and it's done with, and where did the Jets stand from now? Well, the market says that they like the Jets better in this scenario than they did yesterday. We saw this as high as 3. It's now down to 2. The new coach bump is something that always gets bet. Was talking with a pro yesterday, and he was saying it's one of his favorite angles to play in sports. Against the spread, it's been 51% since 2000, 40s games in season. Some of that muted or I guess altered by opening, closing line and the movement because you're not looking likely in that sample size of data that's representing those bets at what the number was. You're looking at after the bets came in and what you were getting to most likely on that adjusted number. Something to keep in mind, but it's just traditionally a very popular spot. When it comes to the Jets, as you tell, the voice is really starting to go as I'm very under the weather. A couple things going forward. One, is Jeff Ulbrich going to be able to keep calling plays on defense? He's been awesome at leading the defense the last 2 years. We see it all the time. Good DCs jump to head coach and they fail. How is he going to manage that situation, and do we see a Jets defensive dip in performance because of it if he takes on too much? He said everything is on the table for changes on offense. I would hope that means more tempo, more pre-snap motion. It doesn't have to be crazy. It's just got to be there. Because right now there's been none of it. The offense is way too static. And I would hope it means some changes on the offensive line to open up the ground game. The Jets wanted to be a run-first offense coming into the year. That's not what they are at this point. I don't know if they can revert it enough to get to that level, but they can't just be the static offense that is relying entirely on the quarterback to make play after play after play with no outs and nothing easy coming to the offense. So what happens with the defense? What do we see in offensive changes, potentially with pre-snap motion, potentially with more play action, just trying to make things easier? And what do we see from the offensive line? Big 3 things that we have to see going forward. We'll see what commentary comes from Rodgers' appearance on McAfee later. If there's any hints, we'll get press conferences coming up post-practice. A lot to figure out here with the Jets. But as it stands now, the market certainly likes this spot for them to bounce back. Now, there's a lot of Bills injuries to watch for. As you're looking on both sides of the football, who's going to be back on defense at linebacker in the secondary? What's going to happen on offense with Shakir? A lot of question marks with this and what we're going to see. So, with all that said, I don't really have an opinion on the game. I don't really have an opinion on the total, and I don't want to just loft up a general sports take because this is a betting show, and that's what I do. So, we'll see what comes of this. It's a weird scenario, I would say, with kind of not a lot of context to look for. The last time we've seen someone fired at this juncture of a season was Matt Rule with Carolina. A completely different scenario. So a weird day for Jets fans. We'll see what comes of this in the upcoming days. Now, I usually have my 9 a.m. live stream preview every single Wednesday. Playing that one by ear. Might push it back to Thursday. I don't know if the voice is going to survive a full hour show. We'll keep everybody updated with that. But for now, have a fantastic Wednesday. We'll chat to you bright and early tomorrow on the next episode.